The question here asks hydrogen peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen. Explain why this is a chemical reaction. What are the reactants and the products in the reaction? So the first thing that we will do here is to define what a chemical reaction is. So a chemical reaction, so we are going to write a chemical reaction changes substances into different substances, by breaking and forming chemical bonds. So in our case, it is very clear that this is a chemical reaction. The reason is that hydrogen peroxide is broken down into oxygen and water. So because of this, we can see that there is a breaking of bond. So hydrogen peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down into water H2O and oxygen. This is a chemical reaction because hydrogen peroxide changes into different substances. This is a chemical reaction because hydrogen peroxide changes into different substances. So we want to know which of them are the reactants and which are the... So the reactant here is hydrogen peroxide. So if we have 6 molecules of hydrogen peroxide in aqueous form, in presence of energy, it is broken down to 6 molecules of water, which is a liquid, plus 3 molecules of oxygen, which is a gas. So these are the products. These are the products. And this is the reactant. The next question. How do endothermic and exothermic reactions differ? How do endothermic and exothermic reactions differ? How does endothermic and exothermic reactions differ? We are going to answer this directly. The difference between endothermic and exothermic reaction is: one, exothermic reaction releases more energy than it absorbs. This one releases more energy than it absorbs. It releases more energy than it absorbs. The products have lower bond energy. The products have lower bond energy. Than the reactants. The excess energy, is often given off as heat or light. On the other hand, the endothermic reactions, an endothermic reaction absorbs more energy. It absorbs more energy than it releases. Here, it releases more energy than it absorbs, and here, it absorbs more energy than it releases. Products have higher bond energy than reactants. Products have a higher bond energy than reactants. Energy must be absorbed to make up for the differences. Energy must be absorbed to make up the difference. So this is as far as endothermic and exothermic reactions are concerned. Let's go to the next question. Let's go to the next question. That is question number 3. Critical thinking. Infer. The process below is exothermic. What must be true about the bond energies of the reactants and the products? Explain. So what we are having here is, of course, oxygen molecules plus sugar releasing, of course, carbon dioxide and oxygen, and water. This takes place in cellular respiration. In cellular respirations. So first of all, energy must be released in form of heat. Energy must be released in form of heat here. So energy must be released in form of heat. Energy must be released in form of heat and or light. So in some organisms, the energy is released in form of light, and in some, it is released in form of heat. This is because the reaction releases more energy than it absorbs. This is because the reaction releases more energy than it absorbs. So because it releases more energy than it absorbs, we refer to it as being exothermic. We refer to it as being exothermic, and normally the bonds, of course, here will have the bonds of the products will have less energy, will have less, the bonds here will have less bond energy. They will have less bond energy. Let's go to the next question. Evaluate why might it not always be possible to determine the reactants and the products in a reaction. Why might it not always be possible to determine the reactants and the products in a reaction? Explain your answer in terms of chemical equilibrium. So when answering this question, we have to bear in mind that we are talking about a type of reaction which is a reversible reaction. So in this case, we are looking at a reversible reaction. So a good example of this is carbon dioxide accumulating in cells, and then it is converted to carbonic acid. It's converted to carbonic acid. So carbon dioxide converted to carbonic acid. But this reaction is reversible, which means at the lungs there will be more there will be less carbon dioxide. So the reverse will happen, and the weak carbonic acid will now be converted back into carbon dioxide, which is released out of the body at the lungs. So when a reaction takes place at an equal rate, answer here, when a reaction takes place at an equal rate, in both directions, the reactant and product concentration stay the same. So in this state is called equilibrium. Is called equilibrium. So equilibrium is reached when the reaction in both directions, the reactants and product concentration is the same. So at that instant, there is no difference in production. There is no difference in production. So equilibrium is reached when both the reactants and products are made at the same rate. So when carbon dioxide is converted to weak carbonic acid at the same rate as carbonic acid, then we call this equilibrium. So at this instant, it is very difficult for us to determine the reactants and the products in a reaction. Why? Because their rate or their concentration is the same. Their rate or their concentration is the same. We will stop here.